Crushgasm, the podcast dedicated to the highs and lows of crushes. From their first to their worst, we're going to cover them all with a cascade of characters, including our guest today, a total bookworm, Lala Loves, a sexual health and sexuality advocate, erotica blogger, and podcaster who is here to talk not only about her sexual awareness brand, educating and erotic stories, but her page-turning book crush. And that's none other than Wesley Rush from the Duff. Lala, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Have you read any good books lately?
Yes, I've read a ton of good books. The last book that I read that I would recommend, it's a Cinderella erotic romance by Kay Webster. It's a trilogy, and it's called A Cinderella Story, then Prince Charming, and then The Last Slipper, and it's really good.
I'm that person who's guilty of buying a lot of books and then taking forever to read them. I have like a stack, like a year old. I'm like, one day I'll get to you.
Yeah, see, I was like that until I got a Kindle. Then once I got a Kindle and became an e-reader, I started blowing through books like crazy. Like, I've already read like 35 books this year.
We're only in, we just started April. 35?
Yes.
That's probably how many I've read in maybe since like I ended high school. We'll say like that many years. Like, that's a lot of books. Oh my God.
Yes, and it's really because of the e-reader. Like before that, I'd probably read like, I don't know. I mean, this might be a lot to people, but I probably read like at max maybe 8 to 10 books a year.
That's
at max. But yeah, before now, I would have never been able to read 35 books in like 3 months.
So Kindle, you enjoy. I just like having the books on my bookshelf. I love arranging them by color because I have a lot of knickknacks and they're color coordinated. So let's get to this question. I do want to start off by saying the Duff is based in high school, so I'd love to know what teenage Lala was like back then.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So actually for me, unfortunately, high school was a really dark time. I can tell you something funny though, if this tells you anything about my personality. When I was in high school, I got voted most likely to be on a reality TV show. I was student body president. I was like in a bunch of clubs. I was an officer of my high school dance team. I did competitive dance like outside of high school. And I feel like the Duff was really relatable to me because I feel like my 2 best friends were super hot and guys would always ask me about them. And then I was just there.
I totally get that. I was I know I'm aware of the movie, as we've discovered I'm not a reader. And I knew the movie and I was like, yeah, I get it. Because my friends were all like really cool. And I was kind of like the one that was dressed like a boy and just like, I don't wear makeup. I have curly hair. I didn't know how to do it then. It was like gelled down like a helmet. Is bad. No one was talking to me like that.
Yeah, honestly, I love fashion and makeup, but I think for a lot of people with me was I was super transparent, which I am now. So people just really didn't know how to take me then. So I feel like that was kind of a turn off for a lot of people. But like I had like these best friends who were like captain of the cheerleading team, and like this other one was like student body president and was like super great, and they're both super hot and they're very personable people. So I think that was like why I was like, oh, I'm the Duff.
I think the transparency is why you won most likely to be on a reality TV show, because that's what they want. They want the people to tell like true. It is. Do you know which reality show like at the time was big that they probably thought of you for?
Oh my gosh, they would all say okay, so I'm probably about to date myself because I haven't been in high school for like over 10 years, but they would tell me it was Bad Girls Club.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because they told me I wouldn't like take anything from anybody, but
other than being a future participant on the revival of Bad Girls Club, because I feel like it's not around anymore. Were you someone that were like, did you like books growing up? Were you always reading when you weren't telling it like it is?
Yes, I've always loved books, which is actually pretty interesting because I was not the best reader when I was younger, and it actually was really hard for me to learn how to read. But once I was able to learn and I got it and I became like a super reader, like I would read anything and everything. I feel like reading became my solace. Like you can escape and travel and go anywhere in a book. And I absolutely loved it. So it became like therapeutic for me to read.
Was there like a book that got you hooked on reading? Because I remember when I was little, it was I loved Babysitter's Club and Goosebumps. That's really what got me to like books, because it was like, oh, like you got to collect them in a way. So it's like also on that. So anything like that for you?
Yeah, so I was obsessed with the Babysitter's Club, but then there was also this author named Phyllis Reynolds Naylor that wrote the Alice series, and I was obsessed with those books. It was like a teenage girl growing up from like junior high to high school, and how her life was going and everything that she was going through with her and her two best friends.
That sounds kind of like YA, which what I like about like YA books, and I think is what makes them such a huge business, is they sell a real fantasy, even when it's not about the werewolves and the vampire loves. They do, you know, the ones even set in reality, like the Duff, we get to dive into this high school fantasy of like the cool guy wanting us. Do you agree that's part of the reason why these books do well?
Yes, absolutely. You see the same thing. Like, I was a huge young adult fiction person. When I wasn't reading erotica, I was reading young adult fiction. And like, even with To All the Boys I Love, The Summer I Became Pretty, Sister of the Traveling Pants, it all gives you that fantasy of how high school should be versus maybe how high school actually is. So you can escape into this world where everything seems like the perfect high school experience.
Now, a book crush is not necessarily the oddest type of crush, because I think it's quite common. But it's more odd in the sense that we truly fall in love with the idea of someone in our head. We cannot see them. We know only the words on the page. For you, what makes someone go from just another character to your book boyfriend?
For me, it's when I'm really rooting for them to win. Regardless of what's happening in the book or how horrible they may seem, if I fall in love with their character and I want to just know more of their backstory, and I'm rooting for them to have a happily ever after or win at whatever, you know, the end of the story is, like the ultimate goal, that's when I'm like, oh my gosh, this person is like my book boyfriend.
When it came to the Duff, this was just a book you picked up on a trip at Barnes & Noble one day. Are you the type that browses and picks up a handful and hopes they're good when you get home, or do you sit there and like invest in like the little snippet on the back?
Oh, I sit there and invest in like the little snippet on the back. Before, when I used to have more time, I would read like the prologue or the first chapter of the book before I would buy it, and I would do that for like tons of books.
In the store?
Yeah, I would spend like hours in Barnes & Nobles. I'd be in Barnes & Nobles for like 3 hours.
Oh my God. The first chapter, I'd be there, like, I'd have to get there when they opened, and then they close it, be like, are you done? And be like, I'm on the first chapter, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm such a slow reader.
Yeah, I was obsessed.
So, well, we're going to dive into Duff, and more importantly, Wesley. Personally, not the guy I'd probably fall for. More like Ducky over Blaine and Pretty in Pink, Jughead over Archie and Riverdale. I'm that type of gal. So I gotta know, like, what was it about this rich, popular boy in this particular book that made your heart skip a beat and made him book boyfriend?
So for me, he actually kind of reminded me of this guy I was in a relationship / situationship while I was in high school. Like, it was very sexual. He was popular. A lot of girls loved him. He came from a little bit of money. People thought he was attractive, and it was a sexual yet toxic relationship. But Wes kind of turned out how eventually I would have hoped for the guy I was talking to in high school to turn out, but it wasn't. So I think that too, when I went back and read it in my 20s, made me kind of relive that relationship, how it should have went versus how it actually went. And I think that's what sold me on it.
It gave you the fantasy of your reality.
Yes, exactly.
So has there ever been an instance where you really, really disliked the male lead in a book that was supposed to be like the it guy for the main girl, but then like you felt like the main character should have ended up with someone else? You're like, like if Wesley wasn't the guy.
Oh my gosh, yes, all the time. What was a book that I felt like that? There's a book. Okay, so there's this book series called the After series, right? And in that book, she's really, I hated the main character of the book because he reminded me, like I said, of the guy I was with in high school, like super toxic, super like crazy, super self-absorbed, super narcissistic. And there's his friend that was actually a good guy that she kind of was in a relationship with for a little bit, and then she went back to the more toxic relationship in that guy. And I feel like if she had stayed with his friend, who would have just done anything to be with her, that was actually her perfect guy.
Do you ever like go and like, you're a writer, so do you ever try to rewrite these endings?
In my head, I do. I haven't gotten really big into fanfic yet. I've thought about it, but I just feel like, why not just write my own stuff is more my thing. But definitely when I was younger, especially like in high school and stuff, if I didn't like how a book ended, I would sit down at my computer and rewrite like every chapter I thought should have been done differently. Yeah.
You've really told it like it is. You're like, I'll tell the author how it should be too. You're like
Exactly.
finding their email, their home address, sending it to them. Like, this is how it should have been.
I should have done that. I didn't think about that. Also, into all the boys I loved before, I liked her with Peter Kavinsky, but I actually loved her with John Ambrose McLaren more. Like, the second book was my favorite book, and I feel like she should have ended up with him.
I only watched, again, didn't read the book, but I saw the movie. I only watched the first movie, but she upset me because she got so mad at her little sister for sending these letters, but she addressed them. Like, why put the address, girl?
That's what I was like. Her oldest sister in the book actually addresses that with her. She was like, clearly you wanted them to know, otherwise you wouldn't put the address on them.
Could have just left them in a blank envelope, girl.
Yep.
So when you pictured Wesley in your head, did you ultimately see someone that looked like Robbie Amell, or was it another actor that you felt like could have played the part that you wanted?
So Robbie Amell is attractive and he kind of looks like him, but he's not in my head, because Wesley should have been like more built than he is, taller. He should have had like curly, kind of unruly hair, and he should have had like these piercing gray eyes. An actor kind of like him, I was looking this up earlier. This is gonna probably sound crazy. I don't know if you ever watched What's Eating Gilbert Grape when Johnny Depp was young.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so a young Johnny Depp with gray eyes.
Anything young Johnny Depp's wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, even like old weird Johnny Depp that wears like 5,000 scarves and looks like a weird like he thinks he's Jack Sparrow. You know, it's kind of hot.
Yeah.
Like, he's too meta. It's like, Johnny, they ain't making no more movies. Stop.
I know, right?
So, what was some of the things you loved about the movie version of Wesley, and some of the things you thought, no, it should have been more like the book?
So some of the things I like about movie version of Wesley was he was more quirky and funny. Some of the things that I hate that they missed out about him was he was a lot more self-assured and confident in himself, but then he was also more of a troubled soul, which him and Bianca in the book were more on equal playing fields in that area. So I feel like he brought more laughter on the screen than what he would have brought it in the book, because he was more egotistical, but he had like this more troubled soul, but he had this huge heart, and he was really sweet and tender and handled her with care when she needed it, when her family was having a lot of issues in the book, which isn't explored in the movie.
I was gonna say, like, I was reading the synopsis and it sounded like really all they took was like the idea of what a Duff was in the movie.
Yes.
Because like the book sounded very dramatic. I was like, oh my God, there's alcoholic parents, a divorce, and the movie seems very just teen movie comedy, haha.
Yeah, the movie, they made it very cliche, and the book was more like real life. I think that's too what I liked about the book too, was it dove into more real life things from a teenage perspective that you deal with, like absent parents and neglect, like alcoholism, a bad divorce, teens having sex and unintended pregnancies, and a lot of stuff that are things that happen with teens that people don't want to talk about, that should be talked about. And also something that I did like about Wesley in the book was he was this huge, supposedly man whore, and he was dealing with the neglect of his parents and them not being there by not wanting to be lonely. So he was letting any girl that talked to him come be with him at his house, and they would get intimate. But what a lot of things Bianca talked about was he put her pleasure first. And that's a huge thing that a lot of times doesn't happen for women in general in their sex lives, is their pleasure being put first. And I thought that was interesting in a young adult fiction book that they talked about when they would get intimate. The scenes weren't explicit or anything. They would just talk about how they'd have sex, but when they would talk about the intimacy and the burn leading up to it, they would talk about how he would always do stuff to put her pleasure first when it came to their sexual activity, which was also interesting because the book was written by an 18-year-old girl at the time.
I was gonna say, didn't, like you said, a high schooler wrote this book, so it's very like adult thinking, and then they took it and made it very like a 12-year-old might have wrote it, because that's what it sounds
Yes.
like, some of it. But maybe A24, who's done like Midsommar and all these like, you know, those artsy films, maybe they should redo the Duff. I think it would be more like the
definitely.
So,
yes, definitely.
Wesley is atop your book boyfriend list. So what's kept him in your heart so long? Because sometimes our crushes, they pitter patter, they go away, but this one stays strong.
For me, what made him stay strong was because he manned up at the end of the book. And like I said, right, so like my guy in high school was a very traumatic event for me. So one of the things like I learned through therapy is like rewrite what you want, that how I wanted that story to end. And so Wesley Rush in the Duff was how I would have wanted my high school situationship and relationship to end. And one of the parts of the book that I love is that he talks to Bianca at the beginning of the book, talking about how he's super hot, he's super this, and he doesn't have to chase girls, like girls always want him. And when he wants to win her heart, he says, Wesley Rush doesn't chase girls, but I'm chasing after you. And that sounds like super corny to me at almost 30, but I'm like, oh my gosh, every time, even today, when I reread, like skimmed through the books, I like remember it, my heart melted on that part. Like, I don't know what it is about that line, but it was like, I'm willing to change for you because I truly love you and want you to see me as a safe person that you want me to be.
Totally not corny, because on like the Vampire Diaries / the originals, when Klaus tells Caroline or whatever her name is that I wasn't your first love, but I'll be your last, I was like, oh my god,
yes, I remember that.
I was like, oh my god, I was like, Klaus Michelson just took my heart right this second.
Oh my god, Klaus Michelson used to always take my heart. I loved him in the Vampire Diaries in the original series.
I was watching it. I was writing reviews about the Vampire Diaries, and it was right about when they were going to bring them on as the backdoor pilot for the originals, and I got obsessed with the originals, but then they changed the day it was on, and I lost it. And those shows, you're out 1 week, it's like, what is going on? There could be like 17 new vampires. They're taking, so I lost it, and I hope to go back one day on Netflix.
Yes. I finished it when it was on Netflix, and oh my gosh, like, I can't, like, you just said his name and I totally forgot, but the oldest brother,
Elijah?
He was, no, not Elijah, Klaus, there you go, sorry. He was like supposed to be this bad guy, but he was really just like this, I don't know, this really great, like, lost soul. Kind of reminds me of Wesley Rush in the book, like, just this great guy, but had this hard, you know, exterior that just needed to be cracked.
It's like, we had an author on, and her crush was Jason Momoa's character in Game of Thrones, and that was kind of like the same thing, this bad boy that just, but when he loves you, he softens up, and that was like what was attractive, you know. I get it. So I did want to shine a light on a few of your other book boyfriends, because you've got a handful. So I'd love to play a quick game. I'm going to say the character, and you tell me what you would like to do on a first date with that character. Okay. I think it changes from person to person. So we'll start with Wesley.
Oh, Wesley. Him, I would love to play pool with him. Because there's this really hot scene in the book where they're playing pool together, and I would love to have been Bianca in that scene.
So playing pool. What about William Blakely? And for those listening, from the last song, who was played by the beautiful Liam Hemsworth in the movie.
Yes, I would love to go mudding with him in the truck.
I was like, I have no idea what mudding is. What is
so they like go out in like this wet area on a dirt road in the country after it's been raining, and you can also do this with four-wheelers, but it's a little bit more dangerous than four-wheelers, and you basically get stuck in the mud and it slings everywhere, but you have like the time of your life.
Have you ever gone in real life?
No, but I've had friends do it, but like I'm kind of girly, so I was just like, I don't want to get that in my hair and makeup, so no, I'm not doing that. But for Liam Hemsworth or William Blakely, I would definitely do it.
What about Luke Collins from The Longest Ride?
Just like, so I'm from the South, and I went to college in Fort Worth, Texas, so I would go out and go two-stepping and have some beers with him.
Some good old time. What about John Tyree from Dear John, who anybody listening that knows me knows that I definitely seen this movie because I love Channing Tatum.
With him, oh gosh, his character in the book was such a quiet person and a sweet soul. So honestly, with him, It would probably be something just as cliche as, I know in the book they like go and just watch planes take off and they just talk and they get in real deep conversations. So I would want to do that with him.
I wonder if Channing Tatum does have deep conversations. He's dating
Zoe Kravitz, right?
Yeah, it's like that beautiful, beautiful woman. Who is it?
Yeah.
So what about Landon Carter, who I think is just a cult classic crush?
Yes.
From A Walk to Remember.
And that was the only book and movie I've ever watched where the movie was better than the book.
Really?
Yes. And with A Walk to Remember, I would want to go stargazing with him because I'm actually into astronomy. And so I just thought that was beautiful and sweet when they did that.
You wouldn't want to be in two places at one time?
No, but that was sweet too, that he checked off everything on her list.
We watched that on a school. Well, I was in this like college outreach program, and on our way back from one of the college visits, we watched that on the bus, and I was like bawling because I had never heard of it or anything, and I was like, why would you show this in public? God.
I know, it's such a. I used to watch that movie like literally every single day, and my guy in high school I was seeing, he was just like, do you not watch anything else? And I would sit there to annoy him. I would say every single word, and he'd be like, turn it off.
It's like
I was
masochistic almost to watch that.
I know, I was obsessed. Yes.
And lastly, Gideon Cross from the Crossfire series.
So, this is a hard one because he was a billionaire, so he could do whatever I wanted. I would have him fly me out to Costa Rica and let him be my Tarzan in a treehouse, like what he does for their honeymoon in the books.
Wow. It's always good to end with a millionaire.
I know, right? I'm like, who doesn't want like this man who can make all your dreams come true because he owns pretty much everything.
So we've reached the final chapter of this portion of the interview, and it's time to write your happily ever after with Wesley. So if you would have dated him in high school, how do you think your lives would have ended up? Would you have been high school sweethearts, ended after graduation?
I think we would have been high school sweethearts. I don't know if we would have ended up together after high school. I personally like to think I've had a lot of growth since high school and things have changed. So I feel like he would have been great in the sense that we would have dated, had a good memory of a sweet high school love, and then we would have partnered and he would have set kind of the pace of what a healthy relationship should be moving forward when I met my forever person.
It's like you guys would have remained good friends. You would have seen him on Facebook,
Yes, and I would have still talked to him and been like, oh, hey, yeah.
You would have liked his photos, sent him a comment now and then. That's good. Very healthy end to the crush.
Yes.
So now it's time to talk more about what you have going on. Stumbling over my words. What inspired you to go into working towards shining a light on sexual awareness? It's a different career path.
Yes. So crazy story. I was in fashion industry, and that's where my advanced degrees are, in fashion and business. And I was good at what I did and I liked it, but I didn't feel like it was kind of meaningful. And then I had dealt with sexual trauma in life, and I've also dealt with like reproductive health issues. And so I wanted to be the voice to people and give them kind of a free, safe, comfortable zone to talk about any issues dealing with women's health, women's sexuality, and women just wanting to have a healthier and more normalized look on sex and life, because that was an area that I've always struggled with. So I just wanted to create that space for everyone.
And do you focus on like Black women? Because I know I've heard a lot, especially with like pregnancies, Black women being ignored a lot in that sense. When like they have an issue, their doctors aren't quite listening to them about their health.
So it's a mix, yes. So I do focus on predominantly women's health, and then I will peel back the extra layer since I am an African-American female and talk a lot to Black women medical professionals about the disparities of health for Black women and for people of color. So yes. And you can check that out on my YouTube channel. And I actually have a video coming out with a reproductive activist at the end of May, early June, that goes over women's health disparities, especially for people of color.
You mentioned like you like that Wesley paid attention to Bianca's like female pleasure, and that's something you focus on in your career. Do you think that that lack of interest in our pleasure as women stems from centuries of like the patriarchy that's gone on in our society?
Absolutely. And I think just how there's so many social normatives and pressures put on women to be a certain way, but no one actually talks about women's pleasure. You hear and you see all this stuff about how to please a man, how to keep a man, but no one focuses on women pleasure. And I think too, something interesting that I read in a study recently is that for a lot of women on their first time, if it's with a man, it's only a 6 to 7% chance that they'll orgasm. And then if they're with another woman, it's a 60 to 70% chance they'll orgasm. And if they're by themselves, pleasing themselves, it's a 70% to 75% chance of the orgasm. So there's a lack of focus and teaching of men of how to pleasure a woman. And I think too, that comes from a lot of people thinking that women have sex for either procreation or just something they do to please their partner. And there's not a lot of focus on women actually enjoying the act of sexual activity, which I think that's a problem because we're all born innately sexual beings. So it should always be a beautiful and pleasurable experience and never mentally or physically painful. So that's always something I always try to stretch.
I mean, in high schools, it's hard. I mean, right now, there's just a struggle to teach anything in a high school. So probably not there in sex ed. But when do you think men should start to focus on that pleasuring of female? Because it is very, one-sided. Like, what can they do? Can they go to a class, research on their own?
As soon as they feel, yeah, definitely. And honestly, I think when they decide they want to be sexually active, and I think it even goes beyond even women, just anytime you want to be sexually active with your partner, however they identify or whatever their sexual orientation is, it should always be a sit-down conversation of a list of wants, wills, and wants. So that also helps with the area of consent too. So you have an understanding of what your partner wants to try, what they like to do, and what they absolutely won't do. And I feel like those are good conversations to have before any sexual activity between anyone. So regardless, you should always be looking and thinking about your partner's pleasure because it's a mutual exchange in sex and not just what you want to get. So there's definitely information I feel like on men's health. They're trying to be more and more about it. You can definitely come see me on my Instagram account or even on my website to learn more about just finding your sexual voice and understanding how to please your partner, because I feel like that should honestly start when you're comfortable enough to start engaging in sexual activity.
Which I think, do you watch that show on Netflix, Big Mouth?
Yes, I love Big Mouth. It's one of my favorite shows.
That it reminded me of when Nick's sister and Jay's brother had sex for the first time, and it wasn't great. And then they're like hormone monsters. Are here, like you should ask them what they want. So that's
yes.
And that goes what you're saying. They were comfortable enough to have sex. They should be comfortable enough to talk about it.
Yes, exactly. And that goes for everything. That, like, I feel like a lot of times people miss out on the important conversations. Like, you should be having a conversation before you engage in sex about STI testing, about if this is a exclusive, sexual relationship or if it's going to be open. Like, all those things should be talked about, like even your level of experience, like all that stuff should be talked about before you have sex. Like people feel like it's uncomfortable and stuff, but my thing is, if you're comfortable enough to have sex with a person, you're comfortable enough to have these personal conversations with a person, because at the end, your best sex starts with communication.
So listen up. So where do you hope your career in this realm of sexual health and advocacy takes you in 10 years' time?
Oh my gosh, I would love to be a best-selling erotica novelist, and I would love to have a nonprofit helping with the disparities of health for women in the medical field, as well as advocacies for more resources and help in lobbying to help with laws on the books of domestic violence and sexual violence against women. I would absolutely love that. And I would love to be, like a Shea Boudrum. I would love to be like on her level, giving information and being a trusted sexpert out there in the media.
So you want to be a best-selling novelist, and I do want to talk more about your writing. Have you always been someone who had an interest in writing? Because I know sometimes, like, did you watch New Girl?
Yes.
Okay, so Nick Miller, he's like, yes. Why would I read? I write. And that's me. I don't read a lot, but I write a lot. So were you someone that did both?
I was someone who did both. I've always had a love for reading and writing. Like it was just therapy for me. And I would always like, I mean, I love some of my favorite books, but I would always be like, if they're a best-selling USA author or if they're a best-selling New York Times, I could write a book better than them. I could do this. And so I always feel like Stephen King said it best: if you want to be a great writer, then read a lot, write a lot. And so I've always lived by that. So yeah.
That's what I went to a Paley Fest, as like this TV festival thing, and The Big Bang Theory was there. The cast and the creator, Chuck Lorre. Somebody asked him about because you write all these episodes, and he's like, "How do you be a good writer?" He's like, "Just write a lot, and it'll eventually get good." So I met him and I had him write that on my little pamphlet. Write a lot.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
It's somewhere in a somewhere. I don't know. I moved, so who knows where it is now. But was erotica like your first interest in writing?
So this kind of goes into, so I also want to put this, well, you said this won't be coming out until May or June, so never mind. But like sexual assault awareness and prevention is like a really big thing that's near and dear to my heart. And so I started reading erotica when I was around 13, and I feel like that normalized sex for me and it helped me in my sexual healing journey because it puts a lot of female pleasure first. And erotica actually has shown that 70% of women who read erotica have more sex. And so I feel like, and there's so many mental and sexual health benefits with erotica. So I think that what made me really love it is because it became so therapeutic for me, especially when it came to my mental and sexual health. Like if I wanted to get turned on, I'd read a scene of erotica from one of my favorite books. If I had a stressful day and I wanted to release dopamine, I'd read erotica. So that's what really drew me to wanting to write erotica. For the longest amount of time, I wanted to do young adult fiction, but I couldn't get into it as much as I just love it when I do it for erotica. It's mentally therapeutic for me, and I'm giving mental health benefits to other people. So I think that's what made me fall in love with writing it.
You said you never really dabbled in fan fiction too much, because I feel like that's, when you get into it, that's really erotic, some of that stuff too.
Yes, it is. Because that's how 50 Shades of Grey came out. It was just an erotic writing of Twilight. Yeah. So she basically took the thought in the kind of like the framework of Twilight and turned it into erotica. And I read both of them. And if you go back and really compare notes, you see a lot of the same stuff with the character development and the plots.
Is one better than the other?
Personally, I think they're both great pieces of literature and they're popular in their own right. But I personally love Twilight more. I feel like if you're really into 50 Shades of Grey and you want something a little bit more, I would suggest Crossfire series by Sylvia Day is better to me than 50 Shades of Grey, or reading the Breathless series by Maya Banks is better too as well, but it has that same feel. But Twilight, I feel like there's nothing out there that I would read over Twilight that has those same elements. I feel that's just my personal opinion.
Well, that's why it was a bestseller. Hit series. I mean, that's like, I mean, I didn't know what it was because I'm not hip with books, but the Paramore was on the soundtrack. So like they were going to play at Hollywood and Highland, like the outdoor mall, and they were going to do like a signing with some of the cast members at the Hot Topic. Well, me and my friends just went for Paramore, and I remember I knew nothing of like how big this, Twilight was. And I remember that Taylor Lautner waving at a girl and her passing out. And I was like, what are we at right now? What is going on? I
know. Taylor Lautner was hot at one point to me. So I would have passed out too, probably, if he would have waved at me.
Like, it was insane. Like, I come from the boy band, Backstreet Boy, NSYNC generation, and that's what it felt like. I was like, oh my God, this is huge. And I remember, The Hunger Games. I thought it was a reality show that I hadn't heard of.
No, I could definitely see it. See, Hunger Games was a book and a movie I couldn't get into. So I'm kind of lost on that. I was more of a Divergent fan, but yeah, I thought that about Hunger Games too.
I'd see people tweeting about it, and I was like, it must be on a channel I don't have, or maybe it's streaming somewhere.
Yes.
In the movie, and I was like, oh, okay, I get it. Okay.
Yeah, me and you were in the same boat. I remember my friends were like, oh my gosh, have you seen Hunger Games? And I was like looking on the MTV. I was like, what is this? Because MTV had all the reality shows, but no, it's a movie.
Very real world road rules. That's what I was thinking.
Yes, exactly. I'm right there with you.
But it did have Liam Hemsworth, who was beautiful. So I did watch the
is.
first, and he's not in it a lot, so I was kind of upset. I was like, wasting my time.
Exactly. Yep. I actually fell asleep on it.
Oh, really? It's good. It's fine. I get it. It's fine. Not my cup of tea, but I get it. So, what do you have coming up on your podcast that we can look forward to?
Ooh, so on my podcast, I put out 1 to 2 erotic short sex stories a month. For the month of May, I'll have stories based on, so it's Masturbation May in the sexual wellness community. So I'll have a short story that talks about that, and that'll be what the main character is getting into. And then I'll also have one because it's menstrual health and awareness. So it'll be about, having, period sex and the joys and pleasures of that. And then during the month of June, because it's Pride, I'll have some LGBTIAA plus friends of mine doing some guest readings of the stories. And so that'll be hot and fun. Does voice matter when you're reading erotica? To me, no, it's more so the words, but I will say my sister loves audiobooks, and I'm not a big fan of audiobooks because if I don't like the person's voice that's reading it, it gives me a headache. But I will say erotica, when it's played with music and sound effects, can give you kind of a meditation feel, which will help with the mental health and you being able to let go. So I've heard with my podcast, I do sound effects and music with mine. So people say that it can be arousing, but it can also relax them because of the music I have playing in the background. So,
and you write all these short stories?
Yes, I write all the short stories myself, and my goal is to put out a novella, which is like a erotic story that's about 100 to 250 pages by June. I'm in school right now, so it's a little touch and go, but that's my plan, is to have one out. So hopefully you guys will see it and hear about it and go read it or buy it. Read it or listen to it. My bad.
I had a short story author, and I was just amazed because if I try to sit down and write anything fiction-y, I always get lost. I'm like, oh my God, I can't remember details. That's why I blog instead. Are you laser focused with these, or do you write it, come back to it, or can you finish one in a sitting?
I cannot finish one in a sitting. It usually takes me 2 to 3 days. I do a lot of story mapping, so I'll make Pinterest boards of what I want the plot setting to look like the towns they're in, the activities I want them to do. I do pictures of people that kind of come to my mind when I'm developing the characters, and I write out their backstories, and I write kind of summaries of what I want each of the chapters or scenes to hit, and that's how I stay on task with it. I will say it's a lot harder for me to write a story in 8 to 10 pages than it is for me to write separate chapters of 20 to 30 pages. It's easier to write a lot than a little for me.
Interesting. Everyone has their process. It sounds like an intense process, you're doing mapping and all this stuff.
Yeah, I'm a little neurotic, so.
You said 2 to 3 days, so that's pretty good. It would take me months.
Oh wow. I think because I'm telling you, because I read a lot, and also too, when I had time before I was in school, I would watch a ton of TV too. So that kind of helps, I feel stimulate your creative side when you have a lot of content just floating in your head and stuff. My upcoming story, I'm gonna try to dabble in fantasy and sci-fi. So hopefully I'll have a story coming out about mermaids and sirens that you guys will be able to listen to.
Mermaids don't get enough push in that field. I feel we've got all the vampires. We got the
yes.
werewolves. Where are the mermaids?
Yes, you get
the
witches
bar.
and stuff. I know. I feel it. I love mermaids and sirens and stuff, and that kind of mythological stuff. I'm sorry, I can't talk. And I feel they don't get as much play as they should.
Yeah, my husband does a podcast about the 90s. So every week on that date in whatever year it was, the 90s, they'll watch a movie or a show that came out that day. And he just did Baywatch.
Oh, wow.
And they had a mermaid plot, and it was the weirdest thing I've ever watched on TV.
Yes.
And I'm a big, I will champion for the 90s all day, and I was like, we cannot talk about this. It was like Bruno from Encanto. I was like, we don't talk about Baywatch. I was like, this was horrible. It was horrible.
Jason Momoa acted on Baywatch.
Yes, and he wasn't on this one. I think he was Kimmel probably. Well, this was season 7. He's probably like 10, 11.
Yeah, he was later.
A long time, but yeah, one of the Pamela Anderson's like boyfriend, I guess, was like, I was down there trying to hold his breath, and this mermaid came, and eventually the mermaid thought that he was her lost lover, and it was.
That is hilarious. That's insane. That's when you know shows are running out of content. Like my husband, he was telling me about how on Happy Days, one of the characters jumped over a shark, and that's when the show got canceled.
Yeah, that's where jumping the shark comes from. When a show does something outlandish, it comes from the fans doing that.
Yeah,
they coined the term.
Yeah, he said that's when you know a show's about to be canceled, when just outlandish stuff. Like, I was a huge One Tree Hill fan, and then when Nathan got kidnapped, I was like, oh, this show's about to be over. Oh,
a kidnap plot. I just did a article about Moesha's ending and how it was horrible because we never knew if Miles came home from the wild kidnap at the end of season 6.
I hate Moesha. Like, I didn't realize how annoying she was in the beginning, and it was a show for me that didn't age well. So like, her father, in my opinion, was very misogynistic, so I really couldn't get into it. Yeah, I couldn't get into it as an adult, and then how he had a secret child, and so I didn't even make it to the end. Like, I think I got it to where they went to college, and I was like, this is getting too crazy, I'm done.
Yeah, Dorian, played by Ray J, who comes in as a cousin but is really her brother. Yeah, they were getting wild at the end, but I do want to know, because her little brother ends up getting kidnapped the last episode. There's a pregnancy test, and there's 3 girls in the dorm. We never know whose it was.
I remember that, yes.
I'm so it's been almost 20 years. They said they were supposed to tell you on the spinoff of the Parkers, but because of some drama between cast and that, it never happened. So
yeah,
we'll never know.
I know, it just kind of ended weird. And I feel like too, in the 90s, and a lot of times, like, I feel like now they'll wrap up shows because they know it's coming to an end. But I feel like in the 90s and early 2000s, shows were just kind of end abruptly, so you never really got the answers you wanted. Yeah,
they just cut the cord. They're like, we don't care.
Yeah.
But I think now, because of like Twitter and like social media, the fans can fight back. And so they're like, I don't want that. I don't want to deal with that drama. So let's just wrap it up. Hopefully every show that I watch right now is going to get a good ending, because I watch a lot of TV.
So do I hope so too.
So I do want to ask, can you tell the lovely people where they can find you online?
I do have a website called www.lalasbedtimetales.com, and that has my sexual wellness corner, my love and sex advice, and my erotic story blogs posted. And then you can find me on my podcast, which is Lala's Bedtime Tales Erotic Stories. It's Apple, Google, Spotify, and wherever you listen to podcasts. And then I'm most active on Instagram, which is at lalasbedtimetales.com. And we do a lot of fun stuff over there, like giveaways, and I tease like stories, and we do all types of fun games and reels and everything. So come check me out. Come a sexual liberator.
Well, Lala, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me about your book crush and all these other fun stuff. And everyone, you can find all of her information below. And until next time, as always, keep crushing it.